Hello, good evening everyone, and welcome to our screening of The Valley and the Long Way Home with director Ariel Nasr and protagonist Samaa Elibyari in attendance for a Q&A, so don't forget to stick around for the Q&A. We begin this event by acknowledging that we are gathered on unceded lands of the Ganyangahaga Nation. The Cinema Politica team believes that it is not enough to acknowledge the title holders of the land. Rather, we urge everyone who attends our screenings to become involved in anti-colonial and indigenous-led struggles and resistance in Tiohtià:ke or Montreal and beyond. Nous commençons cet événement en reconnaissant que nous sommes rassemblés sur les terres non cédées de la nation Ganyangahaga. L'équipe de Cinéma Politica croit qu'il n'est pas suffisant de reconnaître les détenteurs de ces terres et nous encourageons plutôt ceux et celles qui assistent à nos projections à s'impliquer dans les luttes et la résistance anticoloniale menées par les autochtones à Tiohtià:ke ou Montréal et au-delà.
So thank you to Cinema Politica for showing that amazing film and our short film as well. Unfortunately, I understand that the director of The Valley couldn't be here tonight. Unfortunately, but Samaa and I live nearby, so we were able to come by and chat with you. So we can't answer your questions about the feature, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the short film at the beginning. Hi, Samaa, how are you?
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. So before handing it over to the audience, I just have a couple of questions. So have you used the short film, The Long Way Home, in other similar cases since then, and to what effect?
Yeah, so it was made as part of a program that was produced through Hot Docs Documentary Film Festival, with a bunch of other films that all had to do with human rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. After making the film, it screened it was sort of toured with Hot Docs, and then it did some TV. And then we took the film and we showed it with Samaa and Abousfian and his lawyer Paul Champ and some others from the National Council
Cinéma
for
du
Canadian.
Parc.
At Cinema du Parc, we showed it. We showed it in Ottawa. We showed it in Toronto. So we kind of toured it around a little bit just to raise awareness. At the time, this was last year, and at the time, as you remember, Samaa, the trial was coming up, and we thought this would be good to show before Abousfian's Canadian trial took place. He's suing the federal government for compensation. But the trial never happened, still hasn't happened. It's been delayed again and again, and so Abousfian is still waiting for a trial date. I was in touch with his lawyer recently, and he told me they're hoping for next year. They're hoping for 2020. So his case is ongoing.
And Samaa, maybe if you could tell us a bit about how you first got involved with the case and what was your role kind of throughout?
I was presenting a program on CKUT. This is Radio McGill, and the program was presenting what we called a unique Arab-Muslim perspective on current events. So I was following the case of Abousfian, and I was talking about it on radio because we felt that it was not sufficiently covered, and especially not covered from our perspective, that this man has gone through great injustice, that he was detained in Sudan and tortured at the request of the Canadian authorities. And when we brought this issue with Foreign Affairs, they said, well, he didn't suffer so much. So it was like torture light, so that was acceptable.
Okay, so now we can open up the questions to the audience. There are 2 mics walking around the room.
Thanks for that, Robert. It's interesting that you live there. It must have been particularly engaging for you to see this film. Yeah, I think there were some similarities, obviously, between the two films in terms of some of the themes that they addressed, including racism. I think I'm probably not the best person to speak to that. I can only speak to my experience in making films with people like Abousfian, and I recently finished making a film in Quebec City called The Mosque, which is now on CBC, and we're getting ready to air it on Canal Day in French. And it's about the Quebec City mosque shooting. Obviously, unfortunately, there's a big problem here and abroad with racism. I really don't know. I mean, it's such a general question, but I think we could open it up for a broader discussion. Certainly, in Abousfian's case, racism played a major role, and what's scary is what we didn't address in this film is that subsequently to him returning, and the government forcing the courts system forcing the Canadian government to allow him to return, there was an episode in which a document which was highly charged was leaked to the press by CSIS. And it's a document that was actually not allowed in the 2009 court hearing because it was judged to be highly prejudicial, and also its origin wasn't clear. So it's a document that was supposed to prove that Abousfian was a terrorist, but it appeared to be hearsay and was therefore thrown out. That document was leaked to newspapers across the country. One newspaper out of dozens agreed to publish it. It was La Presse. And so Abousfian's reputation was obviously deeply damaged, and this is before he had a chance to do his trial, to sue the government. Why do we tend to believe that people are terrorists when they come from a certain background? Why do we tend to buy that story, or at least to believe that it's possible in a way that that scares us? That's it's something that I think we need to ask ourselves, especially with the increase in other forms of terrorism. And maybe you can speak a little bit as well about that, Samaa.
Just a few thoughts about the second documentary and the refugee problem. I wouldn't say that it's only racism. I mean, it's a complex problem. We should also think about why those people are so desperate to leave their countries and cross the border, in fact, get out of their countries. And I was just reading an interesting article today that said those who govern, the dictators that govern those countries, should pay for the refugees. So the problem is, first of all, we certainly have a responsibility towards those who leave their countries, and once they come in our country, then we have to treat them in a human way. We have to be sensitive to their suffering and not all turn them back to another country or throw them into the sea. So this is how I see it. I understand that people don't want immigrants, or they're afraid, and it's kind of a fear that's motivating them not to have any empathy. But at the same time, I'm also looking at the larger problem. In the case of Abousfian, for sure, there was an element there of racism. He's a black man, he comes from Sudan. So, of course, it's not someone that you might feel sympathy for because he's not maybe like yourself. But this is part of humanity. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you believe in. We are all human. And this is, and there is the law. Let's not forget that we are in a place where the law has to be applied. So we failed Abousfian on two accounts. The first account, because we didn't, so few people stood and said, well, we have to apply the law. And beyond the law, well, he's a human being, he's here, he's Canadian, and we should at least respect his rights, and this was not done. And I would like to add that I'm so grateful for Ariel for doing this documentary. It's so important.
Thank you.
I mean, I can tell you what I know, which is that he was eventually removed from the UN blacklist, which made his life easier. He still has had some problems traveling, but because of his relationship with several lawyers, he has been able to visit Sudan. So he's been able to do some international travel. He suffers from PTSD. He hasn't gone back to work, but he does have a daughter who he has continued to raise. And he lives in Montreal. And you know, as far as the trial goes, what I understand from his lawyer is that due to a technicality, the government was able to ask the judge for more time to review documents, and that's what they've done. So yes, there was a legal basis for the delay, and so that is what has happened. So, but it's the second delay. So one assumes that there's an effort to postpone it because it's politically inconvenient. But that's the extent of my knowledge. Samaa, do you want to add to that?
So although he went through one hurdle, but I understand there is another trial. Yes, he has family in Montreal. And as to being able to work, I don't think that psychologically he would be able to work. I mean, he himself addressed this problem. He has been through so much trauma. It's unbelievable. If he had been here with us and shared his experience, you would have appreciated that it's not coming back to a normal life. The laws are not as important as how much people are willing to put into it, all right? I mean, laws are supposed to protect us, but if laws are unjust, then I believe as an activist that it is our role to go against unjust laws. And the documentary in the case of Abousfian brings out one very important feature that you may say, well, I cannot do anything, or you feel helpless, or you have no hope. But in that case, in particular, you've seen how people getting together were able to do something. I mean, it was unthinkable that Abousfian would come back to Canada because he was prevented from buying a ticket, and those who, if one person had bought this ticket, he would have been in jail. So we got together, there was a number of people who got together and shared the ticket. We each paid $20. It was a symbolic gesture. And I think there were many, there was a long list, and there were big names. So faced with this solidarity movement, the government, of course, didn't charge any one of us. So it's important not only to have good laws, but it's important to have people believe in justice and see that the law is applied to give justice to individuals and not to protect the powerful, not to protect the government. And this is what I think is very important. And never lose hope. There's always a way out, but it is going to take effort. It's going to take effort, it's going to take time. But in the long run, this is what makes us human. We have to do the work. Otherwise, I don't think we would claim that we are doing playing our role here on this earth. So it doesn't matter whether it's the environment or human rights or whatever. you have to be committed to a cause. You have to see what is just and work for it.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why we made the film. It was really inspiring to see an example of activism at work, and if it hadn't been for that group of activists, of which Samaa was a part, Abousfian may have been unable to come home indefinitely. The law, of course, is in place because there's a Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so which stipulates that a citizen can't be prevented from mobility, and particularly can't be prevented from coming home. Otherwise, a person can be banished, as a punishment, which is not legal under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So we have that law, but then there I suppose are ways around that, and then other laws that would have prevented these activists from doing, or intimidated them from doing their work, but luckily it didn't work. So they did it anyway.
Maybe you should mention also, Ariel, that there were so many people who did help Abousfian. I mean, I was in the documentary, but I certainly was not the only one. I was not the one who did most of the work. So.
Yes, there was a large group. I mean, you can really speak more about that. I did the research, but I didn't live in Montreal at the time when this was happening.
Most of my work was reporting on the case, following the case, and reporting on radio what happened. I mean, my heart was in it too, but I certainly didn't put as much work as other people who either didn't want to be, quote or on movies or being seen in a documentary, but certainly, and I have to say they were not Arabs or Muslims, they were just lay people from all backgrounds. They just believed that this man has been through great injustice and he should return to Canada. The first mobilization was to have the case being known. So we tried to talk about it, whether it's through media. The other axis was, of course, to contact foreign affairs, send letters and protests, demonstrations in the streets. So in addition, of course, to the lawyers. So we were working together with the lawyers, and I think we were strengthening each other's. The lawyers were telling us what to say. This is the law, and the law has not been followed, so this is what you should ask foreign affairs to do. And at the same time, we were also encouraging the lawyers, saying that we are behind you. I mean, we stand for justice. We want to live in a country where laws are respected. So it was a very nice exchange.
It has been dismissed. So. One of the problems with the blacklist is that it didn't require any transparent process. So there was no transparency. So there was no way to know why somebody was added. Their lawyer couldn't know even, right? So it's completely sealed, right? So it allows the intelligence agencies to put people on that list without any oversight. Right? So they can prevent people from traveling for any reason. One of the things to know, though, that I kind of discovered more as I was doing the research around this is that the one tactic, especially at that point during the war on terror, so-called war on terror, was to coerce people to give information about other people. So. Probably a reason why Abousfian might have been targeted is that the mosque where he went had a high-profile case in which a member had been convicted of terrorism, attempted. So that may have but I'm just repeating an opinion that I heard from a lawyer. So I don't know that of my own. As far as I understand, it was the U.S. intelligence agency that put him on the list, and there was no way to access the file that they used to support that, or to have any transparency, or to contest it or appeal it. So he was cleared officially.
Yeah, and the UN list, he was not on this list when he left from Canada to go to Sudan. But once he was able, the Canadian government agreed to repatriate him, then we learned that he was on the no-fly list, so he couldn't come back.
He seemed very happy. He came to a couple of screenings. He spoke. He told me later that he was moved.
It was very emotional when he
was
attended.
emotional. Yeah. So he seemed happy.
I can tell you about my reaction when I saw the film. When Ariel came to interview me, I said, okay, this is an interview. He will never put me in his documentary. And after he said, yes, you're going to be in the documentary, I started thinking about what I said. And there were so many things I wanted to take back. And those are precisely the things I found in the documentary.
Yeah, well, we didn't have a large budget, Samaa, so actually you were the only activist. We only interviewed the three of you. That was it. That's all we could afford. So, thank you for noticing that we used the best parts.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will see you all next week for Toxic Beauty.
Thank you very much for coming, and thank you to Cinema Politica, and to Ariel, of course.